Mm-hmm. Always.
Exciting news. We are now part of the Crash the Net network. So we are very excited to put our two passions of podcasting, sharing news, and making fun memes all together. So we are excited to share that with you in these coming few days. And then to introduce our host, as always, going to shake it up a little bit though. I'm going to do a
Ooh.
different introduction. So we're going to introduce Cass first.
So the Dallas Stars have made their big moves. The New York Rangers made their big moves. Carolina's made their big moves. When is Boston going to do a move? Oh, never mind. They don't need to because they still beat the Rangers today.
A long path.
Yeah, it was. Great tangent. And then I'm going to introduce Ethan next.
Yeah, that's me. Go Stars. And I'll just leave it at that. Oh, and Mark Stone is a turd. I'll say that too.
We'll talk about that.
And then last and certainly very least, we have Jesse.
I am wearing a jersey for the only team that I'm a fan of that's worth anything right now. So let's go Tips.
Perfect. And so we are excited to start tonight's show podcast with a great guest. We have Jeff Paterson, who is joining us tonight. He is the host of the Rink Wide Vancouver postgame show and a senior writer for the Canucks Army. So thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
There's been a lot that's happened over the last 24 hours with Vancouver. JT Miller's out. This is something that's been talked about for a couple months now. Do you think that this is going to solve the team's locker room issue, or what do you think this move is going to do for them as a group?
Well, they're certainly not a better hockey club without JT Miller, but JT Miller ultimately controlled the cards. He had the no movement clause here, and it became apparent that whatever it was that had him and Elias Pettersson butting heads, they just couldn't bridge the gap. And you probably saw the inflammatory remarks of the president of hockey operations earlier in the week, Jim Rutherford, in an interview with the Globe and Mail newspaper here in Canada. You just don't see hockey bosses making those sorts of remarks, but he laid it all bare. And basically, I think that sort of paved the way for what came later in the week. So, the Canucks did what they could with their hands somewhat tied by Miller in the control. He wanted to go back to New York. Great debut for him. Individually, I know that the Bruins beat them handily, but for JT to score twice, look, it's been a down year. JT Miller had 9 goals as a member of the Vancouver Canucks. He had 2 already as a Ranger. This is a guy that had 103 points last year, though, and that was just sort of getting him revved up for playoff hockey. And when he is on his game, when he's invested, he's a beast. And
yes.
He's so unlike anything else that the Vancouver Canucks had. And I think he's the kind of player that you have to have playoff success. So I understand the interest on the Rangers' part, even at the fact that he's over the age of 30 now and he's still got a ton of term and a lot of dollars left. Rangers can handle that. And they're familiar with the player. They drafted him. He's got friends still in that locker room. So you can understand why he sort of targeted getting back to the Big Apple there. As for the Vancouver Canucks, they made the early move before the game last night. And then they played and they lost in Dallas. And we thought they were done, and we were all trying to digest everything that had happened here in Vancouver. And then, hang on a sec. They're not done at all. Burning the midnight oil, and they make the trade with Pittsburgh, and they flip the first rounder that they got from the Rangers and add yet another Pettersson. The question becomes, how many Petterssons can you have on an NHL roster? The answer right now is 3, because they've got 2 guys named Elias Pettersson, and now you add Marcus Pettersson into the mix as well. So, I think they're poor for moving off of JT Miller, but the hope is that in some way it's addition by subtraction, that this locker room cloud, it clearly was dogging this hockey club. This is a team that won 50 games last year, 109 points, won the Pacific Division in the regular season, and here they are sitting below the playoff bar as we do this, and they're not playing, and Calgary is later on, and so the Flames can move even further ahead of the Vancouver Canucks. This just isn't the way the season was supposed to go. And there are a ton of reasons for it, but sort of at the forefront was this notion that two of your leaders, two guys that wear letters for the Vancouver Canucks, two guys that have been 100-point players in the National Hockey League, they just couldn't get along. And it wasn't just, locker room stuff. This happens on every team. This went much deeper. And, we're all still trying to get to the bottom of it. And I don't know if the truth will ever surface. But JT Miller's out the door. And if Elias Pettersson thought there was pressure on him to perform before,
True.
I don't want to frame it as he won this battle of, one stays and one goes. But the truth of the matter is he's here now. And if JT Miller was standing in his way of performing the way that he did a couple of years ago, then it's on him to be a whole lot better than he has been through the first 51 games of the season for the Vancouver Canucks, because it wasn't just Miller, Pettersson as well. Neither one of these guys living up to the expectations, and especially for Pettersson, who, not even a year ago, like 11 months ago, signed that $92 million contract. So he's getting paid, but the Canucks aren't seeing much of a return on their investment in the first year of that deal.
Now, speaking about Elias Pettersson, now that JT Miller is gone, we heard some rumors that there were talks for him going to Columbus. Is there any chance they still move on from Elias Pettersson, the forward?
My sense, and we had an opportunity to talk to General Manager Patrick Elvine late this afternoon here in Vancouver when the team returned from Dallas. He didn't come right out and lay his cards on the table about what's ahead here with a month to go before the trade deadline. But I think now the thinking in the organization is, all right, we've made this move. Miller's no longer here. Let's see what happens with Elias Pettersson. Let's see if he responds to this, that this is a vote of confidence from the organization. They believe in a 26-year-old guy that's been a point-per-game player in the National Hockey League. And as I said, a 102-point player a couple of seasons ago. I think he's going to get the balance of this season. I think they certainly hope that they get back to the playoffs. And part of Elias Pettersson's story, guys, is that his struggles go back to last year, and he was, quite frankly, abysmal in the playoffs, where JT Miller became this alpha and carried this team on his back. They all kept waiting for Elias Pettersson to show up and do anything for the hockey club, and it just didn't happen. I think they're going to give him another opportunity. If they do get to the playoffs, though, and he struggles like that again, I have a feeling that this organization is going to come to a pretty quick conclusion that maybe he isn't the kind of player that ultimately you can win championships with. So a fair bit riding on the remainder of this season. They've got to get to the playoffs first and foremost. And again, they're below the playoff bar right now. But to answer your question, in the short term, I know there's been a lot of chatter. I think it really was more one or the other. They picked category A. That was moving on JT Miller. I think they now see how Elias Pettersson responds to all of that.
I agree with you on that. I think it would be foolish of them to get rid of both of these guys in such quick succession. I would want to see what he's able to do with that team. It would be rough if he's unable to perform in the playoffs and you now have to try and get rid of that massive contract that he signed.
Well, and it's important to note here, too, that just because of his age, he wasn't able to get trade protection in the first year of that 8-year contract. You have to have enough years of service to, that's all in the CBA. So he doesn't have any trade protection whatsoever until July the 1st. So that gives them runway here. It gives them the rest of the regular season. It gives them whatever playoff activity they're able to take part in. And then they can step back and review, in and around the draft ahead of the opening of the free agent period. They could still pull the trigger on it, and it would be a massive trade. And obviously, it's not happening right on the heels of a JT Miller deal, but it would be a fundamental shift to have these two 100-point guys, a 5th overall pick. Again, like if you look at players through history that have been 100-point players before the age of 25, it's a short list.
Yes, it is.
And almost all of them have skated right through the front doors of the Hockey Hall of Fame. His cohorts there are remarkable. So he didn't forget how to play hockey. It's just this question of like, what's happened? Is it in his head? Now that the air has sort of been cleared in that locker room, the Canucks are banking on this guy stepping up, because in those earlier seasons, like he was so dynamic. He would take guys on one-on-one. He had this absolute rocket of a one-timer that he just seems absolutely reluctant to take. He doesn't score goals that way anymore. Doesn't score many goals to begin with. He has got 1 goal in his last 10 games here. So it's been frustrating for Canuck fans because he showed such flash. Like he looked like the kind of guy that you did want to build an organization around. And boy, has he taken a big step back here in the last year or so. So let's see where it goes. But really over the last 12 months, and like last January, 1 year ago, as we sit here on February the 1st, it probably was a year ago today, he was named one of the 3 stars of the month in the National Hockey League. He had 14 goals in the month of January. And he doesn't have 14 goals this season. Like, it's just been this precipitous drop off a cliff, and nobody can really explain it. So going to be a really fascinating sort of final 30 games here for Elias Pettersson and for the Vancouver Canucks.
Cass kind of got you talking about the future, what's going to happen. I'm going to go back and pretend these trades didn't happen, because these were massive trades, and you mentioned the timeline of it. One was before the game last night, one happened after, and then like this domino effect kind of happened. You saw some teams make some moves. Do you know of any trades that were getting really close to being done with other teams that then just fell through, and that's what pushed this? Because I do remember reading some Dallas writers talk about, hey, the Stars could be in on Pettersson, or the Carolina Hurricanes right before the Mikko Rantanen trade. They were supposedly trying to get a deal done with Vancouver. Do you know of any of those trades?
Well, I do think that, in fact, I know that the Carolina one, and that went down a week ago. I do think there were parallel talks between Carolina and Colorado and Carolina and Vancouver, and it did sound like Elias Pettersson was certainly the centerpiece from the Canucks side of things, and they just couldn't come to an agreement. And I wonder if Carolina was sort of shopping and figuring out, what was the best deal ultimately they could get for Marty Necas, and when Mikko Rantanen became available, that was the player, obviously, that they elected to go with and move forward on that deal. But yes, I think the Canucks were certainly there. And the previous week, the Canucks and the Rangers were close, and I think
I remember that.
I don't know if it's the exact same deal. It sounded like there were some issues around the Rangers wanted the Canucks to retain on JT Miller because he's got 6.5 years left. I think the Canucks were looking for maybe a few different and better pieces in the deal. And this happens in hockey, right? That one broke down, but the framework was sort of there. They doubled back, and here they are. So, again, I don't think there's a general manager in the National Hockey League that's doing his job and his due diligence if he's not kicking tires on a 26-year-old 100-point setter. They just don't become available on the trade market very often. So I would think the Canucks have had lots of interest. I know the Canucks in Buffalo have been linked, and obviously the Sabres are just having a disastrous season yet again. And you could understand if they elected to blow that thing up for the 100th time. But I just don't know that they had the pieces necessarily that interested the Vancouver Canucks to get to a point where they were prepared to move forward there. So I think the Canucks have been involved in a lot of things. Patrick Elvine and Jim Rutherford they're aggressive, they're active, and I don't think they're done yet. But in terms of identity, I don't know if the Stars were in on Elias Pettersson, but Jim Nill's two-time defending general manager of the year. Something tells me that he wouldn't miss out on an opportunity to at least find out. And then we see him pull the trigger on his trade today with San Jose. So I think there's lots going on. I think this Four Nations face-off is sort of an artificial break in the schedule that we're not used to seeing. Generally, it's an all-star weekend, but this time, I think teams are stepping back and taking stock of where they are a couple of weeks ahead of the actual trade deadline on March the 7th. So I think we're going to continue to see the trade talk and trade discussion. I think people now are seeing what the costs are for, high-priced rentals, and seeing round picks move a fair bit. So I think this is all part of the shuffle leading up to March the 7th and the actual National Hockey League trade deadline.
Oh, and that Four Nations tournament's just going to make things even more hectic.
So it's evident that this team, the 2024-25 version of the Canucks, is not the same team that they were last year. Besides the locker room issues that may have potentially contributed to it, do you think that there's anything else that may have contributed to the downplay for this team? And if there are any sort of gaps for the roster, where would you like to see Alvin target and try and correct them?
Yeah, I think now that the Canucks are just past the 50-game mark, it's become apparent in this market that last year was the outlier, that so many guys had career years that just weren't going to be repeatable. They had, as a team, they had an incredible shooting percentage. they came out of the gates red hot. At one point in November, JT Miller, Elias Pettersson, and Quinn Hughes left the building tied for the NHL scoring lead, like 15 or 20 games in.
Yeah.
You don't see that very often, but that kind of tells you the type of start that they had. It included an 8-1 win over Edmonton on opening night. They beat San Jose 10-1 a couple of weeks after that. They were just absolutely feasting on the power play. Everything was going right, and they were completely healthy. And this still, like when I see what's happened this year, I look back, their top 7 scorers missed a grand total of 5 games last year. Like they had all the best players available to them all season long, and that just doesn't happen. The only real injury was Thatcher Demko in the middle of March, and that hurt them, obviously. But they still got through the first round of the playoffs against Nashville with a third-string goaltender and took Edmonton to a Game 7. So they had enough there. But really, it was so many guys. Nils Höglander scored 24 goals, all at even strength last year. He's sitting on 4 goals right now.
Yeah.
Dakota Joshua was an 18-goal scorer, and he missed a third of the season with a hand injury. And then on the eve of training camp, it's revealed that he's had testicular cancer surgery, that he's not going to start the season. He's got 2 goals. So there's a guy like Höglander and Joshua combined for 42 goals last year. They've got 6 between them right now. So, the top end of the lineup was incredibly productive, but then they got that next wave. Like they had depth scoring that other teams didn't have. Power play, you name it, it worked. Bertocchi was pushing all the right buttons. He was coach of the year. But it's apparent now that last year was last year, and they've sort of reverted to the norm a little bit. And the top of the lineup, outside of Quinn Hughes, and it's incredible. We've been talking for 15 minutes or whatever, and his name hasn't come up. He is performing at a Hart caliber level. Like he is. With Miller traded, Quinn Hughes has a 25-point lead in the team scoring race as a defenseman. He's 25 points in front of the next closest Canuck, and that's Connor Garland. But again, that's sort of instructive too, that Connor Garland's the highest scoring forward, and it's not Elias Pettersson, it's not Brock Besser, it's not Jake DeBrusk, who they went out and signed in the offseason and brought in. And so, nobody is having the kind of season that they had last year outside of Quinn Hughes, and that's what makes it remarkable that, he's the highest scoring defenseman. He's, I think, the front runner to defend his Norris. And here in Vancouver, there's a lot of talk about, in terms of the definition of the Hart Trophy as the most valuable to his team. If you took Quinn Hughes off this Vancouver Canucks roster, they'd be playing in the American Hockey League, quite frankly. And so it really has been remarkable and just so much fun to watch. He's a true artisan, he's a craftsman. Like he's doing things that really nobody else in the game is doing, and certainly things that nobody else in the history of the Vancouver Canucks has done as a defenseman. And to think that some doubted, could he be effective as an undersized defenseman? I think he has proven all of the doubters. If there are still doubters out there, they got to come around on this guy. He is an incredible hockey player.
And he just hit that 100 games with multi-points. First time a defenseman did that in Vancouver history.
And just to put that in context. So, and I think he had another one, so he's up to 101 multi-point games. He's played 410 games in the National Hockey League. So one of every 4 games, this guy is putting up multiple points. Like, as a defenseman, on a team that's 20th in the National Hockey League in offense too. Like I guess the disconnect here is that he's having such a good season, how it hasn't inspired his teammates, how it hasn't rubbed off on his teammates. Like if I'm his teammate, I'm just getting him the puck and I'm going to pick up a bunch of points because I'll get second assist, whatever. So that's part of the disconnect, is how one guy can have so much going his way, and as hard as he's trying, the rest of the team is just kind of scuffling along, and again, surviving just below the playoff part right now.
You had mentioned that without Quinn Hughes, they would be playing in the AHL. They'd be an AHL caliber team. And I saw the stats I don't remember what they were off the top of my head, but without him, they are nowhere near competitive without Quinn Hughes in the lineup. So it just goes to show you how important he is to that team.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, every night it seems he does something, and then the league will tweet out from its public relations arm, Quinn Hughes has done this tonight, and he joins Bobby Orr, Paul Coffey, and Ray Bourque as the only 4 guys in NHL history. like that's been on the regular, and you just shake your head and you think that this guy is keeping that kind of company. Again, just to frame things here, he's got 59 points this year. Before he became a Vancouver Canuck, the franchise record for points by a defenseman in the season, Doug Lidster, solid NHLer, not flashy, but in his best year here in Vancouver, he had 63 points. Quinn is at 59 points and has played 47 games.
That's wild. Now, okay.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, that's on a nightly basis here. Like, it just he keeps doing these things. He's at 14 goals in the year. Franchise record is 23 for goals by a defenseman. That was Adrian Aucoin before Hughes was even born. So it's been a quarter of a century since Adrian Aucoin, who had this big one-timer, 18 of his 23 goals were scored on the power play. He just was a power play merchant. Quinn is not. I mean, he gets a bunch of points, but not goals that way. But he's at 14. There's enough runway here that's another thing that I think he's going to take a legitimate run at. Certainly 20 goals for the first time in his career. And I think he's got enough if he gets a little help from the team around him and they're able to keep their head above water. I think he has a legitimate shot at adding that to the many, many franchise records that he already holds and will continue to break as his career goes along here.
So, okay, Quinn Hughes, obviously he's a producer. He's great, all of that. And this isn't, I'm not asking this to discredit that, but then he also wears a C, right? So we've kind of dissected this whole Paterson and Miller thing. As the captain, do you think he could have done more? And I'm asking that as someone who, for most of us, when we see Quinn Hughes, it's the guy who just looks like he's uninterested in whatever's going on.
He's got the face. Get to watch him like I do.
Yeah,
he is very memeable, even here in Vancouver. Yes. Quinn Hughes resting face, without a doubt. I don't think disinterested. I'm not sure what the right word is because this guy's a hockey nerd. He watches. He always talks about how much he watches his brother's games in New Jersey, obviously before the Canucks play. In the late games here on the West Coast, you ask him anything, he's pretty much got stats for just about everything around the National Hockey League. So he's all-consuming as a hockey nerd, but I know what you mean. He doesn't necessarily look the part, but boy, when he straps on the gear, look out. He's incredible, but I think that's a fair question. Why couldn't anybody play peacemaker here? And again, if we had some actual facts about, was there a flashpoint? Was there one incident? Was it a repeated incident? It's been sort of suggested that JT was this alpha that, rode Elias Pettersson and just kept challenging and pushing him. And Elias Pettersson, if you know him, is reserved. He's got a bunch of interests outside of hockey. But when it's go time, generally this guy has showed up and performed, and that's what makes this season so different. But yeah, I think there's organizational failing here, not just on Quinn Hughes, but from the top down that, they should have put this fire out earlier.
Agreed.
And ultimately, they had meetings. I think they had a bunch of meetings at different levels. At the end of the day, it was two guys that just couldn't settle the difference. And so I'm guessing that Quinn Hughes tried hard to do it. I think he's well liked and respected in the locker room. Guys rave about his leadership, but even Quinn...
And surely he's learned something from the situation as well. Something he'll take with him.
I hope the organization has. I asked Patrick Alvin that they cannot allow themselves to be back in this position, a year or 2 years, whatever.
Absolutely.
Whatever went on. As a manager, your job is to manage. It's to manage the players, their relationships, all of that. It's not just managing the salary cap. They've got to sort this thing out. So I hope organizationally that there were a ton of learnings from this. Ultimately, it forced the Vancouver Canucks to move off a really good player who led the Canucks in scoring in his time here in 5.5 seasons. Way better than a point-a-game player. I'm talking about JT again here. And that's why I say, they're not a better team in terms of skill level and heart, but I guess ultimately addition by subtraction and just kind of paving that way forward, we'll see if that allows some other guys to exhale and move that distraction out of the air, the black cloud that was sort of hanging over this hockey club. Right. And we'll see what impact it has. They started reasonably well. And I would think that last night in Dallas, that deal came down literally in the minutes before.
Yeah.
It's going to shake your team.
that's going to be tough for the coaching staff. You've got a game plan. You lean on JT to play 20, 25 minutes. Take him out of the equation. You're plugging in a guy who's just come up from the American Hockey League, and Atu Ratu. He's certainly not going to fill JT's skates, the power play, all those types of things. And just on an emotional level, like, this is a guy that's been here for 5.5 years, gone to battle with the Canucks. So, their start was good, but maybe predictable that they couldn't sustain it against a good Dallas team. We'll see. They're home to Detroit on Sunday night here, and some of the new faces are supposed to be in the lineup. We'll see if that gives them any kind of boost. But I'm kind of curious to see some of those guys that were close to JT. What impact does that have on them now as they have to pick up and move on without one of their friends and teammates?
This will probably be our last question, and we thank you for joining us. Before we started recording, we started talking about Thatcher Demko, his injury history, stuff like that. He's on the year 4 of a 5-year deal where he gets paid $5 million. Is there any concern moving forward? His injury, you think he's going to be the goalie that he was? Obviously, he wasn't named to Four-Nation Face-Off. Do you think he'll be named to the Olympic roster? Give me your overall thoughts on him.
Not surprised about Four Nations just because of the injury that went back to last March and didn't start the season and made his season debut in December. USA Hockey had to be clear in its mind that he was going to be 100%, and I think there were some concerns there, and talk about an embarrassment of riches with Connor Hellebuck and Jake Ottinger and Jeremy Swayman, and on it went. So they're going to be just fine in goal and every other position too. But I don't think that was a concern for Demko. I think he knew that for the first half of this season, his one job was to rehab and try to get back to the National Hockey League. That said, returned against St. Louis on December the 10th, lost in overtime that night, and just hasn't looked the part of the guy that was the Vezina finalist behind Connor Hellebuck last year, who was the runner-up. Now, starting goaltenders are kind of like lead running backs in the National Football League that, their shelf life at the very top, at the pinnacle of the game. Like, if you go back, Philip Grubauer was a Vezina finalist a couple of years ago. The guy was put on waivers earlier this week. Like 5 years ago, Ben Bishop and Robin Lehner, and they're out of the league now. So it can be a fickle business. Goaltending is always a numbers game. The Canucks were very fortunate that Kevin Lankinen was hanging around as an unsigned, unrestricted free agent on the eve of training camp. And he has been terrific. Outside of Quinn Hughes, he's been the next best player for the Vancouver Canucks. So goaltending generally hasn't been an issue, but the issue here for Thatcher Demko is, as you said, he's got the remainder of this year and next $5 million if he's on the top of his game. Like, that's one of the great deals in the National Hockey League, but he has not been a difference maker. Didn't look good in Dallas last night. 3 goals on 14 shots, beaten cleanly by Rope Hintz on a breakaway. Zach Hyman beat him on a similar breakaway a couple of weeks ago in Edmonton, and there are some that are wondering about his ability to, it was a knee injury, a muscle in the knee, the popliteus that we've all learned so much about here in Vancouver over the last couple of months. But there are some that are wondering about his ability to, drop down, the motions that you need to play the position. And look, it's goaltending in the NHL. Like, you have to be so free and clear in your mind that your body is going to do the things that you want and need it to do. And if there's any hesitation, you just can't. Like, the shooters are too good, the players. And so, Thatcher Demko's a competitor. He knows that he hasn't been good enough. He's copped to that, but he won't bring us inside his world in terms of where he thinks he is in his recovery, how close to 100%. Is there a concern that he's never going to get it back? And so, with a year left on his contract, the Canucks have to be thinking long-term. That's the business of hockey, that, it's not about, it's not being disloyal to Thatcher Demko. They've got to figure out this year and next year and project 5 years out and figure out goaltending and all that kind of stuff. So Lankinen is an unrestricted free agent to be again. He's going to get a raise. Is it going to be here in Vancouver, or is he going to take himself to the market? And, how much interest do the Canucks have in re-signing him? Not just as insurance, but do they turn the page on Thatcher Demko and hand the goaltending reins to Kevin Lankinen moving forward? So again, I think the final 31 games here in Vancouver, guys, are going to be so interesting on so many levels. We talk about Elias Pettersson, Brock Besser's time here. He's a pending unrestricted free agent. Doesn't feel like the team wants to commit the term and the dollar to him, so they may be moving him as a rental here. This is the longest serving Vancouver Canuck, over 500 games right now. Only organization he's known, but his time may be coming to an end. And with Thatcher Demko, if they commit to Lankinen, do they put Demko on the market this summer as well? So
Right.
ton of moving parts, not just the new pieces that are coming in and going out, but lots of questions about the players that are already in place here for the Vancouver Canucks. And without a doubt, and I'm glad you brought Demko up because he's, I think now that they've made the Miller move, Thatcher Demko really, like, the spotlight's on Paterson, but there's enough to go around here. And the lights are pretty bright on Thatcher Demko to see if he can elevate his play over the, how many starts is he going to get? If they're battling for a playoff spot, they may not trust him as much. Like, Lankinen probably gives them a better chance to win most nights right now. So that's not a position Thatcher Demko's been in for a while as the backup and the number 2, or if it's 1A, 1B, that he's the 1B in this equation. So how is that going to affect him mentally as well? Again, so many topics and so many questions around this hockey club. Never dull here in Vancouver this season. That is for sure.
I love it. I was surprised by how Shelob's kind of fell off in the beginning of the season. He looked really good in those playoffs last year. I went up to see game 1 against Nashville, and he was just lights out. So for him to be not in this roster and having Lankinen come in and take that over just surprised me a little bit in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great story, and I think we all love an underdog story. It's a 6th-round draft pick in 2019 that not just playing in the NHL, but as you said, thrust into action in the playoffs, and then facing the Edmonton Oilers in a Game 7 in the second round with a chance to go to the Final Four. But boy, right from training camp this year, and I don't know if it kind of got to his head that he had some success. He didn't look in training camp, and I think that forced their hand to go out and find some reinforcement in Lankinen.
Sure.
And then they started the season with Shilovs and Lankinen, and it did not go well for Artur Shilovs. Got lit up on opening night. Calgary scored 6 on him, and it kind of went sideways from there. And so, as I said, so much of its confidence at this level, he had it in the playoffs, but it disappeared on him in a hurry to start this season. And as a result, he's now in the minors right now, and they're not writing him off. He's 23 years old. Like, they're not writing him off by any stretch.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a battle for him to climb back to the level of prominence that he enjoyed last spring.
Jeff, that is the last question that we had for you. Thank you so much. Where can people find you?
I host Rink Wide, which is a live stream post-game podcast after every Canucks regular season game and the playoffs as well. We had some fun. Actually got to go to Nashville and go to Edmonton and do the podcast on location last year. So from that standpoint, want to take the show on the road again this year, but they got to get it's out of my hands. They got to get to the playoffs first. But we do Rink Wide after every game and rotating cast of co-hosts and just have a lot of fun breaking down the games and taking listener feedback in the live chat. Also writing at Canucks Army, cover the team, go to all the games. And I've got my thoughts up on sort of the legacy. It's a complicated one for JT Miller, but did a lot of good here, but also, may have worn out his welcome. So that's the latest column that's up at CanucksArmy.com. And somehow I just, they let me go to these games and write and talk about this. So I'm going to keep doing this as long as I can.
I don't blame you. Here's hoping one day we'll be able to do something like that. Jeff, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, good fun on Saturday, guys. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good one. So that was Jeff Paterson of the Canucks Army. Go check him out on CanucksArmy.com. He is also at Paterson Jeff on X. Moving on from that, we do have some crazy things that have happened as we've been talking about. Vancouver traded JT Miller. They also traded Jackson Dorrington and Eric Brandstrom to the New York Rangers. Miller's back with the team that drafted him 15th overall in 2011. In return, Vancouver got Philip Hedl, Victor Mancini, and a first-round pick in the 2025 NHL draft. That was a conditional pick, top 13 protected, transfer to 2026 if it falls in the top 13. JT Miller had a really great game with the New York Rangers today, probably the only player on the team that had a great game, as they lost 6-3 to Cassidy's Boston Bruins.
Wow.
Excellent. I'm going to ask you, Jesse, because I don't know too much, but I've heard his name. What's the scoop with Mancini? Was he a high draft pick? Was he a touted prospect? What's his story?
I don't really know off the top of my head. I know he played a little bit in the beginning of the season with the New York Rangers. I remember seeing him in preseason games and maybe the first couple games. He looked like he had a pretty solid shot from what I recall. I remember making a comment on it in one of our group chats, and he seemed like he had a lot of promise. That's probably why Vancouver wanted him in this trade, so it makes sense to me. I liked him a lot from what I saw, and I think that he could be a really great person on the blue line.
Yeah. Cass, there was another Vancouver trade. Oh,
There was. I'm surprised. I'm surprised Jesse didn't want to take this one instead of the one he just talked about. But whatever. Vancouver traded Danton Heinen, Vincent Descharnay, Melvin Fernstrom. I don't know who that is, and a 2025 conditional first round pick that they got in the JT Miller trade to Pittsburgh from another Pedersen. This time, Marcus Pedersen and Drew O'Connor. That 2025 conditional first round pick is top 13 protected, meaning when the Rangers suck ass for the rest of the year,
Which they will,
and they finish 12th in the league, that pick goes to 2026 instead of 2025. So, here's to the Rangers finishing 14th and the Canucks getting that, and then them having a good season next year and they getting a shitty pick next year. So.
Right. Looking forward to it.
I mean, we could keep talking about these for a long time, but we just had like a great insider on all of it. So we'll move on from Vancouver. San Jose, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but San Jose, they made a trade. They traded Mikael Granlund and Cody Ceci to Dallas for a 2025 first round conditional pick. A 2025 first round pick and a conditional 2025 fourth round pick. That fourth round pick will upgrade to a third if Dallas makes the Stanley Cup final. This is not the move that I was expecting Dallas to make. It's like a weird, it's like, okay, that's addressing things, but not in the way you expect. I don't know. See, we needed a better blue line in the offseason, and we go after like Labushkin, Dumba, Brandon Smith, and it was just lackluster. They haven't really been working out well. So now you bring in a guy like Cody Ceci, and it's like, I don't know. And then Granlund, I think he's great. But
I think he's going to be good for you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we need to score more goals. That's a big problem. And with a lot of guys out, like Tyler Seguin, Mason Marchment, yeah, I mean, he'll have a role for sure.
I think it's going to be good for them in the long run. They do need, they are injured. We're going to talk about it a little bit more later on, but they definitely need to figure out something to bolster that roster because of all the guys that they've got out right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Moving on from that, the Washington Capitals, they signed goaltender Logan Thompson to a 6-year, $5.85 million extension. Well deserved, indeed. Yeah, he's in his first season with the Washington Capitals. He was acquired in a trade with the Vegas Golden Knights earlier last year. He is one of the reasons that team is so high in the standings right now. They have been playing phenomenally since the beginning of the season. Nobody expected them to be where they are. Spencer Carberry definitely deserves the Jack Adams for what he's done with this team, because last year they were a shell of themselves. They did not look good at all. You know, the New York Rangers swept them out of the playoffs in the first round. This time they are a threat, and it is because of contributions from guys like Logan Thompson, who got a well-deserved extension in Washington.
You know, going back to when that trade went down between Vegas and Washington, I thought Vegas dealt the wrong guy.
I agree.
I said it from the get-go. Yep. It should have been Aiden Hill.
Yep.
And
he was in the middle of
stand by it.
He was in the middle of doing that autograph signing for, I think it was at the All-Star game or something like that. He was doing an autograph signing for the Vegas Golden Knights, and you're like, oh, you got traded. Okay, I guess I'll keep doing this.
You know where the door is.
It's crazy, too, because if I'm not mistaken, he's undrafted, which is wild. It seems like Vegas can't figure out what they want to do with their goaltending either. They let go of Marc-Andre Fleury. They sign Robin Lettner. They dump Robin Lettner. They bring in Aiden Hill. They get Logan Thompson for basically nothing undrafted, and they trade him away. And look, he's having an outstanding year, and he signs this big ticket. So good for him.
Yeah.
Cass,
Yeah, so St. Louis has traded, ready? Scott Perunovich. Boom, nailed it. To the New York Islanders for a conditional 2025 fifth-round pick that Lou Lamoriello won't let anyone know about because he holds his card so tight to his chest. So we don't know what the condition is on this fifth rounder, which is kind of wild. But this means the New York Islanders are going to make the playoffs because now they have Scott Perunovich and Tony DeAngelo.
Which is going to bolster their season and definitely let them go beyond the first round of the playoffs, I'm sure and certain. We do also have more news on St. Louis.
Yep, they put Brandon Saad on waivers, and they're working as of, I think this was today or yesterday, they are working on a mutually agreed contract termination, which I didn't see this coming.
No, not at all. Not at all.
And so I don't know what happens.
Basically what happened was they put him on waivers. He passed waivers. He was going to end up going to Springfield, Massachusetts, which is very far from St. Louis. They agreed to cancel off the contract so we can go find a contract somewhere else. And when we get into it's actually not on our list, but I think he signed with Vegas for a 1 year deal, if I'm not mistaken.
He sure did.
Good for him. He found another home where, Vegas seems to find these players for cheap money and have success there. They don't know how to handle their goalies, but they can handle their skaters. So good for them.
Hopefully he's going to be able to reignite something in Vegas. They need the help. They haven't really been performing up to expectations, but I definitely think they're going to be a playoff team. And once they get to that point, it's anybody's game in that end.
Who knows?
Continuing on, the Seattle Kraken, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, they placed goaltender Philip Grubauer onto waivers to be sent to the AHL Coachella Valley. He has not been what I guess they were expecting when they first signed him after acquiring him in the expansion draft. He is currently 5-15-1 this season, 3.83 goals against average, .866 save percentage, 21 games played. He has not performed up to the level of a starting goaltender, in my opinion, and that goes to show they believe that as well. They have Joey Decord, who has been the primary goaltender for the Seattle Kraken. Grubauer has not really played as many games as he should be as a starter. Just not really what they were needing, what they were expecting. And in my opinion, this is a good move. He needs to go down to the AHL. He's got to maybe, hopefully, find his game again. And he has just not been what he needs to be a starting goaltender. I believe he's at $5 million AAV. He's got a couple more seasons left in there, but I could see a buyout happening for Grubauer, honestly.
Last season of Top Shelf Dusters, we talked a little bit about Seattle. They were clearly not a playoff team, and they had two goalies in what we all thought was a hot goalie market. And it kind of became this conversation of, if they were to get rid of one, should it be Decord or Grubauer? And I've been so concrete on it. Should have been Grubauer. And I wish they had, because then Seattle would be better off. They would have gotten something for him. You're not just buying him out. This was like worst case scenario. And I don't know if they were just hoping that he would be the guy he used to be,
right, or
what. But Decord has been the solid, I guess, between the two, the more solid goalie. And now you're selling Grubauer for scrap parts, essentially.
The other thing is, too, you have to figure, like, we're talking about expansion teams. Vegas moving off from their goalies. Now Seattle, Grubauer, Chris Drieger. They couldn't figure that out either. So it's kind of wild that luckily they got Joey Decord in the expansion draft.
Sure.
Because if they didn't have him, they'd really be in, they might be in Peter Mrazek or Ville Husso land or something like that.
And Grubauer has shown flashes of being the goaltender that he was when he won the Stanley Cup. It just hasn't been consistent. And he just hasn't had the ability to string together good games. There's times where it's all him to make a save, and it ends up behind him. And it's like, how does this continue to happen for a guy who has played so well? And I don't know whether it's because he played on great teams that had amazing blue lines. And I do think that's a big part of it in Seattle, but he needs to figure out what he's got going on. Maybe it's mental. I don't know. Hopefully he's able to get it together in Coachella Valley. They'll be able to bring him back at some point. But like I said, I do think that there's going to be a buyout of at some point for his contract.
And then the next news, and I always find it when players like speak and really speak their minds. Mikko Rantanen spoke to media. His quote saying, "I didn't know we were in a rush. That's what I felt. That's my honest opinion. It's business and I understand. They're trying to think what's best for them. I was ready to take a significant discount from my market value. We had some chats a couple days before and then they traded me. That's what happened. That's why I didn't expect it." And I think it's really shocking to hear that like he was ready to take that discount, like that team-friendly deal for Colorado to stay a part of the team. And they were just like, okay, bye.
Which is surprising.
Yeah. And this is talking about last week's trade between Carolina and Colorado. That's a crazy statement. The way he just aired it all out.
I love it when dudes are
good
honest.
on him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would prefer to hear that. I mean, there's some things that you can't be incredibly honest about, like the JT Miller, Elias Pettersson thing. I think that they handled that very well. But I love it when dudes are candid and really lay it out on what the situation is really about, because it gives us as fans some perspective into what's actually happening in these locker rooms and behind these doors.
The other thing, Amanda, is you can hope that he takes a hometown discount in Carolina just to shove it up Colorado's ass. So maybe they can happen.
I wouldn't be upset with that level of pettiness if it benefits Carolina, especially because he has a goal. He has an assist with Carolina. I think everyone also needs to remember, like, that first game he played with Carolina, there was no practicing. He literally just jumped right into the game with the team. So
you can't use that excuse because JT Miller did the same thing and he had 2 goals. So obviously the Rangers made the better player trade. So
it's easy to look good on a really bad team like the Rangers. So
yeah.
I've got nothing hard to say, so
no. But it will be interesting to see if that relationship with Colorado is severed because he is, up for a contract at the end of the season, and the fact that he was willing to take the hometown discount. I don't know how Colorado lets that go the way it did, because as someone who's had players do that, for example, Matt Duchene, he's taking hometown discounts, even though it's not his hometown. He loves Dallas, so he takes a little bit of a discount. Joe Pavelski did the same thing. I expect Jamie Benn to do the same thing. You can't let those guys walk.
Imagine after all this, if he goes back to Colorado and a whole time discount, reverse the role on Amanda, and now she's really screwed. Jake Gensel, then Mikko Rantanen, it'd be amazing.
I mean, at this point, as a Canes fan, I'd just be like, of course. Like, I'm very like, we will welcome you for like the half a season. We will make you feel loved, be part of the team, like really part of the community, and then be like, okay, thanks for visiting.
They just see that arena and they're like, yeah, we're good.
I know.
Hey, we are working on that. So
15 years later.
Speaking of teams who need to work on their arena.
Yeah, speaking indeed.
Sorry, if you wanted to say something else, Jesse.
No, I was going to say just really quick about Rantanen. I know that Aho has been really lobbying to get him to stay there. There was even a child that I saw who was getting something signed by him, and he's like, well, now you got to stay here, or something like that. He said,
he offered all the money that was like in his piggy bank. It was at a season ticket member signing event. And
what
the kid,
a low blow by Tulski or whatever the guy's name is to use a child to try and
it was definitely on him. Yeah, totally. Moving on from that, going into the league news, the Utah Hockey Club. They will no longer be vying to call themselves the Utah Yeti, as the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office refused a request by the club to trademark the name. The Patent and Trade Office issued a refusal in early January, citing the, quote, likelihood of confusion with other notable brands using the name, such as Yeti coolers. The team issued a statement on Wednesday stating that fans who attended the next 4 home games starting that evening will have the opportunity to vote on the team's permanent name. Those options initially included Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth, and Utah Wasatch, which is a mountain range in Utah that runs from the state's border with Idaho to the central portion of the state. I did not know that. That was not even a part of the initial name list that came out, I think, last season before everything started.
Over the summer, yeah.
So people were surprised by that. I know there was a lot of pushback on why that name was even part of the list to vote for in the first place. As I mentioned, voting started at the home game on Wednesday, which Utah lost 3-2 in overtime. I believe that was to Pittsburgh. But after that game, the team put out a statement that said, quote, "We listened to your feedback and dug into all the data from the fan survey. For the team name, it's clear that Outlaws should be in the mix instead of Wasatch, so we're swapping it out. The surveys are going to continue in the arena throughout the rest of this weekend, it ending on Tuesday. They're going to have the opportunity to vote for Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth, and Utah Outlaws. Outlaws definitely seems like it's going to be the winner. If they made that big of a push to change a team out for Outlaws, that's probably going to be it.
It's very
If that's
obvious what
why.
happened here. It's very obvious. Ryan Smith is married. His wife wanted Wastache in there. It's not worth the argument. It's not worth the argument. So he said, hey, I'm going to throw the option and let the fans vote, and they completely shut it down. So that way he doesn't get in trouble with the missus, and he's covered.
The people always speak,
Happy spouse,
no matter what the
happy
reason.
wife, happy life.
And, you know, Wasatch isn't, when I read that name, I'm like, that's awful. I get maybe why you put that in there, even if it was the misses or if it's homage to the mountain range or whatever.
Right.
But and then there's also the whole thing of what the actual meaning of the word is.
Lots of speculation there, yeah.
Supposedly something about frozen genitalia, which that's not what you want your team to be named. And so I like Outlaw. I think there's a good chance they stick with Hockey Club.
I wouldn't hate that.
It's just hard to what some people call them the Utahns because you got to try and come up with something. But what I don't really understand from this is the whole patent part. If the patent office is going to decline this for Yeti, how did Stanley Cups get their patent through? Like, how did that pass? If there's a whole
because Stanley was already a company, probably
before the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, like the drinking cup Stanley. Stanley was a company before. You know, they make tools, they do other stuff.
Yeah.
But fun fact of trivia here: Utah Hockey Club is not the first team that was named Hockey Club. Does anyone have a guess on who it was?
Absolutely not.
Ooh.
Nope.
Ottawa Hockey Club.
I wanted to say that. I don't know why.
The only reason why I knew is because I had to pretend and Google that when I was researching for Crash the Net earlier this week. So
the more you know.
There you go.
The more you know. Boom, 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 boom.
Speaking about, hold on. Quick point. The Stanley Cup was first awarded 1893. The Stanley Cup Company 1913.
But correct me if I'm wrong. They started doing tools and stuff like that. They weren't necessarily a kitchenware company,
right? But I'm just saying, Ethan was asking specifics about so if you're looking at like who came first, the Stanley Cup, the better Stanley Cup, the best Stanley Cup,
the best trophy in all of sports.
Speaking about happy wife, happy life, buy our Stanley Cup.
Wait, in the comments between those three names, let us know what you think is the better name. I'd be interested to see what people think.
Hockey Club.
Speaking about Hockey Club, the Boston Bruins have brought back Zdeno Chara as a consultant because their defense sucks ass, and they figured they'd bring him back and show them how it's really done. There's no official role from what I understand. He's kind of there to be in team meetings to kind of coach them up, give his perspective of things. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the guy played over 1,300 NHL regular season games. So he knows what he's doing. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. He'll probably go down as one of the greatest Bruins ever. I know there is a Mount Rushmore there, but he is and we'll kind of see where he goes and come back from there. I would like to see him be something to do with the defense to help them out, because their defense has been atrocious this year.
Abysmal.
I just picture
I can't even say
Chara in the locker room talking to the defense, being like, "You just have to be taller. You just have to be taller."
No, they're going to be like, "Hey, Z," and both Zdeno Chara and Nikita Zakharov will turn around and be like, "Hey, what's up?"
We all know who the original Big Z is. Like, let's be real here.
That's right.
Moving on from that, the Four Nations tournament that starts in 11 days. And earlier this week, each team announced their captain. No surprise, in my opinion, for any of these names. USA captain, Austin Matthews. Shocker. Team Canada captain, Sidney Crosby. No surprise there. I know a lot of people were expecting Connor McDavid, but Sidney Crosby's got to be it. I think McDavid's going to be the Olympic captain there. Team Finland.
And McDavid did get the alternate captain.
Yeah, yeah. Team Finland captain, Alexander Barkov of the Florida Panthers. Team Sweden captain, Victor Hedman of the Tampa Bay Lightning. There's been some roster changes that have happened due to injury. I know we're going to get on that a little bit later, but no surprises on these captaincies for these Four Nation teams.
Yeah, not much to really talk about. Did anyone have anything? Or
Nope.
It's what we expected.
I'm not going to lie. I was kind of surprised McAvoy was an alternate for USA. I feel like he is a younger player on that team. I thought it would have been. Who was the other one? Was it Kachuk? I don't remember. But either way, there are more people I thought were going to be higher on that list than McAvoy.
When you have, I get what you mean.
Moving on, kind of talking about Four Nations still, and to get us into this injury talk, NHL Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly announced that players who withdraw from the Four Nations tournament will not face a one-game suspension. And the reason for the clarification is previously for like all-star games, there was a one-game suspension enforced if you withdrew for whatever reason from the all-star game. So you started seeing players drop out, and then this announcement comes out, and then now you're seeing more players drop out, which I think it's interesting. We'll get into it more. But one of the players would be one of my favorite players, Miro Heiskanen of the Dallas Stars. He is out week to week due to a lower body injury sustained against the Vegas Golden Knights, and he will not be playing in the Four Nations tournament. We have the video here because I want to get y'all's opinion on it. I was watching this in real time and thought it was very dirty. I had some Vegas fans tell me that Mark Stone tripped or his skate was wobbly, and that's why he fell, because he couldn't skate well. You see the potential trip, and really it was a stick tap to the shin. If that's going to trip a guy like Mark Stone over, maybe the wobbly skate was the better excuse. But it looks like he kind of dives into Miro's knee.
I do agree with you there, and I'm surprised that it was only a 2-minute minor on this play. I don't want to say there was an intent to injure. I know, I definitely think he was going for the puck, but a guy got hurt, and the way that his knee bends, I want to shut this off. Jeez, the way that it just doesn't look good, and I'm surprised that it was only that 2-minute minor for that play. And Heiskanen obviously didn't come back to that game. He is not going to be able to play in the Four Nations tournament. Missing out.
We would
Dallas
be lucky
there.
if he got back.
Yeah.
By after the Four Nations.
Let's shut that review off because it showed the Buffalo Sabres beating the Bruins 7-2. In case you didn't know, they did have an update on the story, and he actually had more back spasms, and he's going to be on LTIR for the rest of the season, and that's what happened. No, I'm just kidding. But
oh, you're talking about Mark.
You're talking about Mark Stone.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to explain himself.
Fell down.
Moving on.
Speaking about withdrawing from the tournament.
Yeah. The Vegas Golden Knights, Alex Pietrangelo, he withdrew from the Four Nations tournament to tend to an injury. But he was still playing, I saw earlier in the week.
He played on the 24th, I think.
So that was after. I think it was the evening of this announcement, or maybe the day after. He indicated that he is dealing with an ailment and will instead prepare for the remainder of the regular season. There has been no announcement for his replacement yet, though there is speculation that it's going to be Drew Doughty, who was able to come back earlier in this week.
That's a good point. I didn't even think of that.
I'm sorry. Petrangelo played 2 nights ago.
Yeah, he's still playing.
And he's not marked as injured.
No, I mean, you figure with getting over 2 weeks off, it makes sense. You're going to be able to rest and recuperate however you need to. But
it would be interesting to see if any other players do this.
Obviously, the other thing is with Drew Doughty coming back from injury, that's a high caliber player. I wonder if it'd be a different story for Petrolangelo if they didn't have a suitable replacement for him.
Maybe they were like, "Hey, Doughty's coming back. Maybe you
should be injured.
Get hurt. I don't know.
Follow your teammate and trip on the ice."
Yeah, but so Petrangelo not going to be able to play in the Four Nations tournament in a couple days, or a week.
But will play for the Knights. He will play for the Knights.
Another player who will not be playing for the Four Nations tournament, Kirill Kaprizov, because his Team Russia is not part of the Four Nations. But he is also injured and will be missing a minimum of 4 weeks with a lower body injury. Don't know what that means. Have no clue. He did have surgery on it. It's not season it's not season ending. So he's going to miss at least 4 weeks, and they'll kind of reevaluate from there. But I mean, that sucks for Minnesota. I feel like he just came back.
He did, so he was out 12 games, came back, played 3, and then went off to deal with whatever he's dealing with now. So definitely a big loss for them because they need that. They need him.
They absolutely do. They're still on top of the league last time I checked, but that could change pretty quick.
Sure.
There's still plenty of season left.
Yeah, and then moving on from that, Detroit placed Patrick Kane on the injured reserve, retroactive to January 21st. He had missed back-to-back games earlier this week due to that injury. This is his second season with Detroit. 42 of the team's 49 games, 11 goals, 19 assists. Detroit has been performing a little bit better. I haven't really been paying attention too much to them, but I know that since they made the coaching change, they've been performing a little bit better. Kane, I feel like, hasn't really been a factor for them. Maybe I'm not watching enough, but I know, 11 goals, 19 assists in those 49 games. I feel like they'll be okay without him.
I think he's contributing more than you think. I mean, that's a good role player.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really been the goaltending that's changed. That's been the visible change, in my opinion. Ever since having Todd McClellan come back, he's very familiar with Cam Talbot, and Cam Talbot's been playing better. We'll see. It seems like it's not going to be like a long-term thing. It's probably a non-story, but he is injured, so.
Yeah, and they are currently 2 spots out of a wild card, 3 points away. Boston is ahead of them. Tampa Bay is ahead of them. Columbus still surprisingly holding a wild card spot. So they do have the potential to get into the playoffs. Like you said, there's a lot of season left, a lot of runway left. Any of these teams can make it. That race in the East, just like it was last year, is neck and neck. And it's going to come down to game 82.
Yeah. Going back to the Dallas Stars,
okay.
they had another injury, and this time it was Nils Lundqvist. He's another defenseman.
Yeah.
And he has been placed on LTIR because he had to undergo season-ending shoulder surgery. He had previously missed 4 games, and then this kind of just came out of nowhere. It kind of all unfolded with the trade today. And it's a bummer because Nils we knew he had potential, and then he was only skating like 3 to 5 minutes max per game in the playoffs.
Yeah.
It seemed like DeBoer wasn't trusting him. And then this season, he's had a spot most games, and he's had one of the best seasons of his career, and it ends like this. It's just super unfortunate for the kid. I guess he's really not a kid anymore. But he was here on that 1-year deal, so who knows what's going to happen this summer. And with that, they did finally put Tyler Sagan on that LTIR. He probably will be ready closer to probably the start of the playoffs, just because that's how that works. And that's how they were able to make the moves they did today. So
it's obvious that Ethan hates me because he gave me really hard names to say today. First, Scott Perunovic, and now I get to talk about Caden Gooley.
You said it correct.
Nailed it.
There you go.
Nailed it. Montreal defenseman Caden Gooley. No, because I talked about his contract extension in the last couple episodes, whenever it happened. Montreal defenseman Caden Gooley underwent surgery on a lacerated quadricep muscle. Holy crap.
Yikes.
And will be out indefinitely. Pretty big part of the team. He did sign a pretty decent-sized contract. Montreal has played well lately. They've been one of the better, hotter teams in the NHL, and it's not good. It's not good. So, he signed a 6-year, $33.3 million contract prior to the beginning of the season. He had 14 points in average 21 minutes in 44 games. So he's a big part of that team. 21 minutes of ice time for a defenseman. He's top 2 pairing, obviously. So they have to find a way to replace him. It's going to put a lot of pressure on Lane Hudson, the rookie. He'll get more playing time. He'll play in more situations, which will only help his Calder season, which I think he's going to win.
Take this with a grain of salt. It's just what came up in my search real quick, but a partial tear in the quadricep can take several months to heal, whereas a complete quadricep tear would take 4 to 6 months. So he may be out, until the end of the season. Yeah. And who knows? They might make a push.
They're in it. They are currently
more than the Rangers.
Excuse me, they are 1 point ahead of the New York Rangers. Okay,
how many games in hand?
Not like anything's going to change for their season. They have. I don't want to talk.
The Rangers have JT Miller now. Who knows what could happen?
They played very well in the month of January, and now they just given it up. Anyway, moving on from Caden.
I believe
Gooley.
Dallas had the most wins of the month. By the way.
Gross. Moving on from Caden Gooley. Earlier this week, Matthew Knies was placed on IR. They reactivated Max Pacioretty. Matthew Knies was playing tonight for the Toronto Maple Leafs against the Edmonton Oilers. He scored a goal and an assist, 2 points tonight, so he's back in the lineup. So I know that they need him. I know that they need guys like Knies. He's been performing well for them, so it's good to see him back in the lineup for Toronto, even if I don't want Toronto to be successful.
And excuse me, moving on to more fun stuff out of the injuries. We have some pretty big milestones, and one that actually just happened tonight, which is very important to mention because it brings us back to America's favorite hockey team, the Carolina Hurricanes.
That's untrue. That's not factual.
It's very factual.
Okay,
I'm a fact checker. So Brent Burns scored his 900th point. In his career, he had an assist on one of tonight's, goals. So congrats to Brent Burns. That is a huge milestone as he's winding down his career and wanted to bring
that. It only took him so long.
Just like it's taken her so long to say this.
Don't be mean to her.
Sorry, I had to say it.
It was breaking news.
It is.
Breaking.
Anyways, as Brent is winding down his career, we have Detroit's Dominic Shine, who made his NHL debut at age 31, which is amazing. Makes him the oldest since 2015 to make his debut. He has been in the AHL for 9 years. One of those people that you think is going to be a career AHLer is now signed for 2 years with the Wings for $775,000. So it's really exciting to see like those kind of stories in the NHL, like people who just not giving up.
So what you're telling me is I just joined Beer League and I have
now
until next July, because I'll be 31 this July. So I have till next July and I still have a chance.
Yeah, it's over for Cass and I. It's over for Cass and I. There's no chance in hell, but you might have an opportunity.
Let's
I
go,
gotta
Ethan.
climb my way through the beer league rankings.
I would disagree because the oldest rookie to ever play an NHL game was 43 years old
Oh, okay.
in
I've got time. I can wait.
1926-27.
Yeah.
So Ethan,
yeah. So 100.
there were only
99
six
years
teams
ago.
that were around in 1926. Do you know who they are? No, I'm just kidding. He played for the New York Rangers.
99 years
One
ago.
game played.
As I was looking up this this story, there was he was taking his son to buy hockey skates over in Grand Rapids because he was playing in the AHL affiliate over there. Grand Rapids Griffins GM Sean Horkoff called him Monday morning, told him that he's going to be making his NHL debut with the Detroit Red Wings. So he turned around, went to Dick's Sporting Goods, got his son a ball, hustled home, packed his bags, made the drive from Grand Rapids to Detroit. I don't know what that drive is. Alan, if you're in our chat, I know you might know. But he ended up being in the NHL lineup later that evening. He recorded 2 hits, 2 takeaways, 1 block shot, 9 minutes and 50 seconds of ice time. Regardless, not scoring a point. Still an awesome story for Dominic Shine, 31 years old, making his debut in the show.
Now, real quick question. Why does it... I wonder what the criteria is for this stat, because David Ayers, when he made that crazy emergency backup goalie debut, that was his NHL debut.
I don't.
Yeah, but
and-
he's not on the roster sheet to start the game. You know what I mean? Like when you get that roster sheet and it shows the scratches, he's not even listed as a scratch. He's just like
just
a
there.
literal emergency. Oh shit, we're in trouble kind of guy.
If there's any NHL team who needs an e-bug, I'm not good, but I'll do the I'll take it. I'll
take the per diem and the free jersey.
Yeah, for sure. It'll probably be 10 goals on 10 shots. So, don't expect much from me, but I'll take it.
Do you have goalie gear?
Hell no.
So you'll spend more money getting goalie gear.
No, they're going to have to loan it to me.
I mean, what's crazy is like when you read any story about that game back when it happened 5 years ago.
Was it that long ago?
Which is crazy.
Jesus.
He was 42, and all of the descriptions about that game is he made his NHL debut at 42. So I think David Ayers should get the title, but that's just...
Well, I think it makes for a better story of like NHL debut.
And he's actually going to keep
Zamboni
playing.
driver.
Well, yeah, but Shine, he at least will probably play a few more games.
Which really fast, like talking about like Shine's like quick turnaround. Something similar happened to Ryan Suzuki, who just made his debut with Carolina. He literally flew from Chicago to Carolina. His flight got delayed, made it to the arena by 6:15, was on the ice by 6:30.
Yeah.
Finished that game, flew back to Chicago. While he was back at Chicago, Canes called up and was like, "Hey, we need you back like for tonight's game," and had to like fly back for tonight's game.
Yeah,
imagine if the Charlotte Checkers were your AHL affiliate.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, that sounds amazing. Just a 2-hour drive instead.
Yeah.
Which I guess part of that was the bug that's going around.
Not the
supposedly,
e-bug.
in the Carolina locker room.
Right. Well, players need to make a new rule that there's no kissing allowed in the locker room during flu season.
Calm down, Carolina.
Apparently, you choke people like Brad Marchand did, though.
That's fine. We can continue to.
That's a different.
To
Not going to touch that one.
So let's move on before that delves any further. As we were discussing earlier in our interview, Quinn Hughes became the first defenseman in Canucks history to record 100 multi-point games. He tallied a pair of assists in the 5-2 win earlier this week against the St. Louis Blues. Hughes also tallied his 77th career multi-assist game in the process, tying Thomas Graydon for the 4th most in team history. Now Hughes only trails Henrik Sedin, Daniel Sedin, and Stan Smil for most career multi-assisted games in Canucks history. As mentioned earlier, amazing season for Quinn Hughes. I don't know how he continues to do it when the team hasn't been up to the caliber that they were last season, but this dude is definitely elite and continues to show that night in and night out. Even when he was I don't know if is his hand still hurt? Has anyone seen? I have no idea.
Not that I've seen.
A couple games. He was injured, came back, had like a brace on his hand of some sorts. I don't know, but he's an amazing defenseman. He's an amazing player, despite the long face that he continues to show and how memeable he actually really is. Great player in the league.
Even in Vancouver, apparently. We learned that tonight.
Love that. I love that.
Moving on. I don't know if there's a person in management I would rather have a beer with than Paul Maurice. The
He
guy
seems like
has
a cool dude.
the funniest clips you'd ever seen. Luongo maybe too. I don't know what it is about Florida because they get so much vitamin D. I don't know.
That's
But
got to be it, man.
He just seems like such
Jeez.
a down to earth person. Like even like I'll never forget with his he's getting interviewed for the Stanley Cup. He's like, oh, hold on.
Hold
and
on.
he turns around and gets to pick up the cup. Like that's awesome. That's outstanding. So he coaches in his 1900th game the other day. Great for him. He hit 900 wins as well, which is awesome.
Wow.
Impressive.
He only needs one more tie to get 100 ties. So I don't know when that's going to happen. Probably never. He has the most wins among active coaches, and he has the most games coached in active coaches too.
He's been coaching so long, there used to be ties in his career.
He used to coach the Hartford Whalers before they became a defunct team called the Carolina Hurricanes. But there are only 3 coaches ahead of him with more wins. Do you know who?
No, absolutely
One
not.
of them is a GM right now,
Oh, Barry Trotz?
and 2 of them should never be in the game again. And actually, I'm sorry, 2 of them are GM. Barry Trotz is one,
wasn't one. Oh, okay.
and I think Chicago,
Oh, Quenneville?
Quenville, and Scotty Bowman.
Quenneville. Oh, both of them. Oh, wow.
So pretty crazy.
Paul
But
Maurice,
good for Paul Maurice. He's hell of a guy.
he definitely seems like a fun dude. I definitely would love to go down and have a beer with him. That would be awesome.
And our final milestone, we're going to Ryan O'Reilly. He has hit the 800 point mark, and he is joining a very selective club from the 2009 draft class. He's the 3rd player to hit 800 points, and he joins John Tavares and Victor Hedman. So good for O'Reilly.
Oh, without a doubt.
And
Yeah.
it's been a long time coming, but apparently that draft class just didn't produce a lot of like high scoring people over their careers. Tavares, he's at 1,082 so far, and I had Hedman's up, but I lost it.
Good job.
He's got if someone's internet's faster than mine,
It's got to be yours.
it's
Ryan O'Reilly.
it's just loaded.
Ryan O'Reilly has been good for Nashville, but nobody this season has been good for Nashville. They've just continued to have a terrible season, and I know that we're going out there to see them. Hopefully they win. That would be sweet, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I will be bringing my Nashville Predators jersey, though. But yeah, I think that's
It's
it.
crazy because you look at the 2009 NHL entry draft, and there are like 8-10 names just in this first round I've never heard of in my life. It's wild. Carter Ashton, Dylan Olsen, Jordan Caron. He was a bum for the Bruins. But there are a lot of people, even all the way up to, this 8th pick, Scott Glennie for the Dallas Stars. You blew that one, Ethan. So
Ethan didn't care about hockey then.
yeah, he wasn't. He was still in middle school. Actually, he's probably in elementary school at that point.
But yeah, I think that does it for us, right, lady and gentlemen? So
Yeah, I would say so.
yeah,
That is
so
it.
so we stream every Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. That's the time zone I'm in because I can't keep up with anything. Top Shelf Dusters, we are on X. We are now under Crash the Net Hockey, facebook.com/Crash the Net Hockey. You can reach out to us, topshelfdusters@gmail.com. Hit us up in our comments, follow the Facebook pages, follow us on Twitter. We will be back here every week. Thank you so much. We will catch you next week.